The army guy that had led us up the trail was literally impaled and lifted, I'd say, a good 3 to 4 feet off of the ground by this thing. It had dark red long hair, red beard untrimmed, and it had just the muscle mass of two bodybuilders put together. Like if you couldn't imagine a pit bull in human form, that's what this guy, this creature was.
The following clip is about an incident that took place in 2002 referred to as the Kandahar Giant Incident. This is an interview with a soldier who actually fired the killing shot to that giant. His voice has been changed and replaced by another voice to protect his identity. What branch did you serve in, and what was your role during the war?
I was a Special Forces, a PJS, pararescue specialist. So what we did is if a plane got shot down or there was a unit that needed rescued, we'd be called in, come in, rescued anyone, mainly just down airmen or any isolated personnel. So we only came out for high-risk situations.
Where was you deployed at in Afghanistan?
So during Operation Enduring Freedom in 2002, most of my time I was at the FOB known as Salerno, but we used to call it Rocket City just because of the fact that it was always under mortar fire and rocket fire 24/7.
Tell me about the day that the Kandahar incident took place.
So the night prior, we were taking mortar fire all night, pot shots going off here and there. I got maybe 2, 3 hours of sleep tops. Around 1500 or 3 p.m., orders came down for us to gear up and be ready to go in 5. Got on the flight. It took us to the Kandahar airfield, which is the main base in the Kandahar region. Once we got there, that's when they told us an entire patrol unit of these army guys went missing on their daily patrol. What they didn't tell us was any additional information besides that they had been missing for about 2 to 4 hours. My unit was made up of 6 people, and that's including myself. We weren't familiar with this area or this region, so one of the army guys that was already deployed there, that was familiar with the route, agreed to take us.
So, up until this day of your deployment, had you ever heard anything about giants before?
Absolutely not. However, I had heard stories from some of the older guys that was stationed there with me. They had been to the Zabul province. They had seen orbs, lights, UFOs basically in the sky above the mountain regions. They didn't think it was aliens or spacecraft or anything like that. They just thought it was classified ships.
Yeah, I could see how they would come to that conclusion. So take us through exactly what happened when this army guy led you up that Kandahar patrol route that day.
The guy that's taking us up the patrol route is hauling ass. I mean, we got 70, 80 pounds of gear on us. This guy was traveling light. He had his vest, a bag, his M4, and like some spare mags on his belt. So he can move a lot faster than we are. He had personal attachment also because the people that had went missing on that patrol route, a few of them was his close friends. We had to tell him, like, listen, man, you're gonna get yourself killed and you're gonna get us killed. If someone ambushed your men, they're damn sure gonna hear us coming with you hauling ass up here like this, kicking dirt. So eventually we got him to slow down, to chill out. At this point, we were way hundreds and hundreds of feet up the path into the mountains. Nothing but open desert for miles and miles down in the canyon, just huge mountains. So with the elevation, we were already used to it, but it was still kicking our ass. We're following a dirt path, zigzagging up this mountainside. And when we get close to the top, we start seeing gear scattered everywhere, which was never a good sign. A vest plate here, spare mags there, abandoned weapons. Once I seen the guns and the vest scattered, I knew his men was gone. Just at that point, you don't abandon your weapon unless you either died or you fled for your life. There was this lip that was hanging off of the ledge, like right before we reached and got to the top, and it was enough to give us a spot to huddle up. We all put our back against this ledge because we could hear some commotion just on the other side of it. And as soon as we stopped and started trying to listen in, a huge boulder, man, like a huge rock comes flying over this ledge. And it clipped that lip just at the right angle that it kicked dust right into our eyes. And when the boulder slammed, it kicked up the sand and the dust, caused commotion, basically blinding us temporarily. Within moments of that happening, this thing was on us immediately. I just heard screaming, and then there was a grunting noise. It sounded like a grizzly bear. It was a low, deep, and just animalistic grunting. By the time we got ourselves situated and got our vision back, we was just frozen with fear. I mean, dude, this thing literally, no joke, it was 10 to 13 feet tall, completely filthy, covered in dirt and what looked like excrement. And it had a spear, a wooden spear, and it was taller than I am. And for reference, I'm 6'3". The army guy that had led us up the trail was literally impaled and lifted, I'd say, a good 3 to 4 feet off of the ground by this thing. It had dark red long hair, red beard untrimmed, and it had just the muscle mass of two bodybuilders put together. Like if you couldn't imagine a pit bull in human form, that's what this creature was. In that moment, I'm trying to process what I'm seeing, trying to get my vision correct, and then when my training just happened to kick in that moment, that's when I raised my M4 and I yelled, "Fire." Me and my entire unit, we started unloading shots into this thing. They followed up after I initially broke the first shot. I still have partial hearing loss in my right ear from the M249 saw going off right next to me. If you don't know, that's the big belt-fed machine gun. When I say we shot well over 350 rounds, I'm not joking. We all held on the trigger and did not stop shooting until I was dry. That was a good 20-25 seconds of non-stop shooting. The whole time this thing was charging like a bull at us. We were in formation, so we didn't friendly fire each other. We was in formation, backstepping away from it. Now, remind you, we're on top of a mountain. Behind us is like a 200-300 foot flat drop off of the cliff. So we're backing away as this thing is charging us and we're emptying our weapons into it. The giant tried to get the spear unlodged from the army man's chest. And that few seconds is what I believe is what saved us and allowed us to kill this thing. When the bullets started hitting him, that's when he full-blown started charging us.
The way that you broke it down and explain it, I couldn't imagine being in that situation, let alone being able to keep my cool and process what I was seeing. So after that happened, and he finally went down, what occurred following that?
Well, our training teaches us 2 to the chest and 1 to the head. But that saw just did a number on his upper half in his head region. So it wasn't intact anymore, basically. That's legit the only thing that stopped him. So we didn't even need to confirm that he was gone. He was done at that point. The shots to his body, it didn't seem to do very much. This thing, it was engulfed in rage. It was the most angry I had ever seen anything in my life. So once we knew it was KIA, we tried first aid on the army guy that led us up that path. And immediately it was apparent that he didn't make it. The spear was in his chest around his heart region, and we found out that it had clipped his heart. So what we did in that moment is we had to wrap sweat rags around our faces because the smell coming off of this creature, it was so bad, man. That's one thing I don't think I'll ever forget. One thing I do find very odd and interesting at the same time is how one of my men described it. He said it smelled like the pit of hell, like boiling sulfur and 3-week-old eggs. And that is exactly to the T of what it smelled like. The odor was so bad that a few men, even including myself, we severely vomited for the next few minutes. We did eventually clear the scene and we did find the missing men. Some of them fully intact and others, they weren't. Some of them had bite marks on them, pieces missing. It just looked like dogs got a hold of them. And oddly enough, which I still don't know the reason for today, we found some of them stacked up on top of each other right in front of the cave entrance. We also found animal bones littered around the area. It looked like a mountain lion's den. Just all kinds of strange stuff going on in that area.
I'd still just cannot imagine the nightmares, the trauma that would come from being in such an event. But to move on to the next question, can you describe what the giant had on? Was it wearing clothing? Was it unclothed? What did the spear look like? I know you described it as about over 6 feet long.
So, if you've ever seen the movie Tarzan, the skirt-like apparel that he wears, that is exactly what he had on. It was identical to that. He was shirtless. The only article of clothing that he had on was that skirt. And it was made from old animal hide. I think that's where a lot of the foul odor was coming from, was that article of clothing. I don't know if it was fresh or if it was older. It was very matted. As for the spear, it was just normal wood, like a normal human would make a spear, just larger. The army man that was at the head position that was in front of us leading us up there, he was impaled by the spear, and he was in a fetal-like position, laying on his right side. You could see the tip of the spear protruding through his back, and when we looked at the spear to inspect it closer, that's when we seen the tip of the spear was actually sharpened animal bone.
So after you took it down, you secured the area, you found the remains of the missing unit. What happened next?
We radioed it in, gave a brief rundown of what occurred, and the Chinook got there in about 20-30 minutes. Was the fastest I've ever seen one show up personally. They dropped down this blue tarp that was wrapped inside of a net, and we was instructed to load the giant's body up, which some men had to assist us with. It took actually 9 men to move this thing. After that, we loaded up the casualties, and then after that point, we never seen, heard, or even was mentioned about this incident besides the debriefing.